I want to talk about an interesting issue with everybody today. Should Democrats have Republicans in their administration? Today, I'm going to tell you about what two Democratic candidates said about this, Tulsi Gabbard and Joe Biden. And then I'm going to talk about the concept of Republicans in Democratic administrations, whether there's virtue in some abstract sense in bipartisanship. And lastly, I'll tell you why this is actually a pretty meaningless promise to even be making. So let's get right into it. You all know I am not a supporter of Tulsi Gabbard. She is a soon-to-be former congresswoman from Hawaii who has missed the majority of her House votes recently. I am supporting other people in the Democratic primary, not her. But she was asked, would you have Republicans and independents in your hypothetical administration? And she initially said not only is she open to it, she would commit to it. Let's check it out.
Congresswoman, you talk so much about reaching across the aisle. It's a crucial part of your stump speech.
Yes.
Wondering if you would consider or even commit to including Republicans or independents into a Gabbard administration cabinet.
I would make that commitment. The first and foremost qualification for those that I would select for service in my cabinet and in my administration would be those who are committed to putting service to our country and the American people first. We should not be afraid of diversity of ideas and take inspiration from the team of rivals that Abraham Lincoln chose to surround himself with and draw strength from that in being able to deliver that service and results to the American people, rising above partisan interests and, again, putting service to the people above everything else.
She is willing to make a commitment to having Republicans in her administration. Now, of course, this is always an easier commitment to make when you have absolutely no shot at having an administration in which you would decide about having Republicans or Democrats. But let's take her at her word, except she was asked to confirm, oh, so you're committing to Republicans in your administration. She immediately backtracks and says, well, I'm committing not to require that everybody be a Democrat, which is a very different thing to commit to than having Republicans. This is the second part of the clip, which a lot of people have not seen.
So just to clarify, you would commit right now, if you're president of the United States, there will be at least one Republican in the cabinet.
I will commit to making sure that there is no partisan requirement for those who I choose to serve in my administration. Instead, looking at that most important qualification, are you someone who is committed to serving the people of this country, not serving for your own personal profit or benefit or anything else, and that you've got the experience to be able to do the job.
Okay. So before we even go further, notice that she insta-flips. She first says, yes, Republicans, I would commit to that. And then she's asked, so you're committing to Republicans in your administration? She says, well, I'm committing not to require everybody be a Democrat. Okay, cool, Tulsi, good one. Now, before we go further, remember that Joe Biden said he would be open to a Republican running mate, but he can't think of one specifically that he'd be interested in right now. And he was crushed by some Democrats. Remember this clip?
I wonder if Joe Biden would consider choosing a Republican as a running mate.
The answer is I would, but I can't think of one now. No. Look here. No, I'm serious. No, here's what I mean. Let me explain that. There's some really decent Republicans that are out there still.
Now, let's think about this more theoretically and then specifically. This is basically the right answer in principle, right? I'm open to anyone who is the right person, regardless of party. If you're asking me, are there any Republicans today in 2020 that I can think of as running mates? I can't think of one. That's actually the right answer. But let's take it a step further. There's nothing inherently good about bipartisanship. We wouldn't say, imagine that one party is made up of all white supremacists. We wouldn't say, well, I want people from all parties in my administration, including the white supremacist party. Nobody would expect that. Now, I'm not saying the Republican Party is all made up of white supremacists, but the point I'm trying to make is there's not any inherent virtue in saying we will have people from all parties or from all political perspectives in my administration. There are bad parties. There are bad political perspectives. So the first thing I think is important to understand is that on the left, we have to be consistent, okay? If we like the idea of Tulsi being open to Republicans in the administration, it should be the same for Joe Biden. Joe is being upfront. He says, I'm open to it, but I can't think of anybody. I get it. There's a difference between a Republican vice president and a Republican somewhere else in an administration. But if we like the idea of Democratic candidates being open to Republicans in administrations, then we've got to be okay with it no matter who says it. But I don't actually care about that so specifically. The idea of should Democrats have Republicans in their administration, in theory, it's not controversial. We should have the best group of people to advance a progressive agenda in total. If that includes strategically selecting some Republicans to put in some particular positions, then why not? We should not ideologically rule out Republicans with a partisan test. But the reality is that, number one, for the most part, it's not going to be Republicans that help us achieve a progressive agenda. So again, there's no particular virtue in saying, sure, I'll have Republicans. But let me kind of give you the cheat sheet real quick. This entire question is a meaningless political game. I'll explain to you why. Tulsi didn't say cabinet. She said administration. And then she said, well, I'm not saying I would have Republicans. I'm saying I wouldn't require everybody has to be a Democrat. Joe Biden said, sure, I'd have a Republican vice president, except I can't actually think of one. The number of people in presidential administrations is gigantic, and it's actually no big deal to put Republicans in some positions, including the less overtly political ones. And I would go even further. Could I find a tolerable Republican to put in my administration in a position of some actual power to appease those who find virtue abstractly in bipartisanship? Sure. If you said to me, you've got to find some prominent Republican and put him or her in your administration, I could find a role for like Utah Senator and former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney based on the things he did correctly in Massachusetts. I could find something for him to do where he wouldn't really do any damage. And I could say, hey, I've got Republicans in my administration. Would he be the best person for whatever position? Maybe, maybe not. But if the point is to find Republicans to say you have Republicans in your administration, okay, I can find something for them to do. The point here is, and the takeaway is, this is a meaningless political game in that it all comes down to what you mean by Republicans in your administration. I'm fine with what Tulsi said, even though she walked it back and it doesn't even really sound like she meant it. I'm fine with what Joe Biden said, as long as he and I agree that in the 2020 Republican Party, I can't think of any prominent Republican that would be better as a vice president than someone that we can actually find choosing from Democrats. So let's not go nuts with the litmus tests. Let's not go nuts with the concern trolling, the gasping that Joe Biden is open to a Republican vice president, even though he can't actually think of one. That Tulsi Gabbard said she would be open to Republicans in her administration. Biden would obviously pick a Democrat for vice president if he's the nominee. Tulsi has no shot. It's an interesting theoretical discussion, and that's that. There's no particular virtue in bipartisanship, but if you're trying to check boxes that you have people from all parties, you can do it safely and without actually putting Republicans, toxic Republicans in particular, in positions where they would have any serious amount of power or influence over the policy of your administration. That's all this is.